G'day, I'm Jib Smart, this is 2016's Overwatch, and this is a Switch Joy-Con. With Overwatch coming out on Switch really soon, now's a great time to see how well it can play with just one Joy-Con. Here's the plan. We'll play with Soldier 76 and with Widowmaker. Before each game, I'll explain how I'm fitting all those actions onto one Joy-Con while I warm up in the training mode, and then we'll just jump into the action. I expect to have a lot of troubles trying to manage this tiny controller with so few buttons, but hopefully there'll be some triumphs in there too. The overlay you see on screen shows what I'm doing with the controller, what buttons I'm pressing, the position of the stick, and even how I'm turning the controller in my hand. Turning the controller to turn the in-game camera is called gyro aiming, or gyro controls more generally, and this is how I play most games on this channel. As per usual, I'm using a program I wrote called Joyshock Mapper to convert controller inputs to keyboard and mouse inputs. Before this video ends, I'll show you how to do the same. So, gyro for aiming, and obviously we need a way to disable the gyro, just like lifting the mouse off the mousepad to reposition it. We can shoot with SR, and I have SL mapped to both Helix rockets and Sprint. Tap for the former, hold for the latter. We can reload by tapping the west face button, or hold it to activate Biotic Field. North for ultimate and south to jump round out the main actions. The east face button is more than just for disabling the gyro. Tap it to toggle crouch. Holding it is your context sensitive use. The stick can be clicked with a quick tap for melee, or held to bring up the communications menu. Hopefully I don't have to rely on either of those too much, as it's easy to click the sticks in accidentally on a Joy-Con. Tap minus to change hero, hold it to bring up game stats. Now I'm cheating a little bit by using the capture button. Tap to bring up the menu, and hold it for voice chat. Let's get this overlay out of the way. It shows up live on my screen, so I don't have to synchronize it with gameplay footage. So let's put it over to the side and get into the game. Now, a full Soldier game and a full Widowmaker game will take too long for any one of my videos. So these are going to be trimmed down a lot. If you're interested in seeing more gameplay and hearing much less of my voice, I've got an extended cut linked below. Same games, less talk about my subjective experience playing with the Joy-Con. So, this is my very first Overwatch game with one Joy-Con. In fact, it's my first time playing any first-person shooter this way, and I've got to say, I feel pretty comfortable with it, even with only a few minutes warming up and training. Taking out Symmetra very early on feels pretty good, even if it was kinda lucky. Tracking enemies hasn't been too hard as long as they stay right in front of me. And, Reinhardt, I'd much prefer you kept your distance. Bigger turns require more conscious effort. Here, I turn the controller to face the left before I actually need to, so I can disable the gyro and recenter the controller before engaging. Reinhardt, I much prefer you stay out of things. I should have avoided that charge and then been able to keep my distance. Moira and Farah lay on the pressure and keep me from joining an already doomed effort to hold the point, but we haven't lost the game yet. I'm pretty pleased with being able to track Moira here. Not that it's particularly tough normally, but you can see I have to turn the controller really far without a break to recenter. See, I'm struggling more this time, with Reinhardt moving much faster than Moira was. It's not difficult to track him normally, but I slow down once I'm turning uncomfortably fast. Tactical Visor doesn't really care what kind of controller you're using, and while the other team finds cover pretty quickly, good support in my team helps me lay on the pressure. Yeah. Hi, Reinhardt. Let's talk a little bit about aiming with the single Joy-Con generally. The gyro is really tight in this case, and I'm looking forward to see if the native gyro controls on Switch reach their potential, because to be honest, I haven't seen a game that does. But anyway, it's tight and responsive, as with full-size Switch and PlayStation controllers, but the size and shape of the controller itself brings some problems. Being close to half the width of a full-size controller makes things a little less stable. My hands are closer together, forming a smaller circle, which is like playing on a smaller mouse pad with a sensitivity scale to counter it. Smaller hand movements make bigger turns, and little wobbles get amplified. This isn't too bad for just putting an aim on a target, but it's hard to press SR and SL without accidentally turning the controller. Much harder than when pressing the corresponding buttons on a DualShock 4 Switch Pro controller, or on a pair of Joy-Cons used together. This makes keeping steady aim while firing even harder. I try to account for this by holding the controller more tightly with my right hand, and I think you can see the effects of that as tapping SL for helix rockets is often accompanied by the controller and camera bumping to the left, but you'll see fewer such problems with my primary fire. Despite the Joy-Con's shortcomings, I think the bigger issue is probably just my rustiness with the game, and both of these can probably be overcome with some practice, which I'm actually quite keen to do. I can't think of a particular reason to play with a single Joy-Con except for the novelty of it, so I doubt it'll be supporting the Switch version. It's unlikely to have local multiplayer, so you'll always have two Joy-Cons or a full-size controller on hand. But I am keen to see where I can go with this. With enough practice, will it become second nature to me? Do problems with big turns just disappear like they do with a mouse when you've gotten used to it? Or are some of these problems just impossible to overcome?
Done well.
So, look, after a rough start, I reckon that was a pretty good game. Let's move on to Widowmaker. The same configuration isn't going to work for every hero. You can't bind two actions to the same button if they both need to be held, for example. But with Widowmaker we can keep it simple. Make it work with Soldier 76's configuration, by making her scope toggle instead of needing to be held in the settings. Now, if my problem with Soldier 76 was that I was out of practice, with Widow it's much worse. In 3 years with this game, apparently I have about half an hour with her across all game modes. So I'm starting on the back foot, but I'm keen to give her a go. She seems to value precision more than most heroes, so that seems like an interesting test for the Joy-Con.
Select your hero. One shot, one kill. Attackers incoming in 30 seconds.
Okay, so we're off to a bit of an embarrassing start, but no harm done. Hopefully I can pull things together before the round starts.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello there. This is my will.
I suppose the thing to do is just keep making shots until you get them, right? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've got an enemy Widow. I'd bet good money she's using a mouse since we're on PC, but let's see how we do against her. So far, she's up 1. I didn't mean to bring up the menu there. I'm struggling a bit more with the controls here than I was with Soldier, and I think it's just because with my inexperience with Widow, my attention is more thinly spread between what I'm supposed to be doing in the game and what my hands are actually doing on the controller. This is taking more shots than I'd like. There we go. Even the score. Even if Hammond avenges her. Ugh, these almost hits aren't doing us any good. I think if it was easier to hit this little shoot button without moving the controller at the same time, I'd be much more help to my team. Almost. That's more like it.
No one can hide from my sight.
As tricky as it is with the controller being so small, I'm much better off like this than trying to snipe with a tiny joystick. One nice thing about playing with Widow is I can mostly get away with just pointing in the same direction, so I'm not too disadvantaged by not having a right stick for the bigger turns. You can see again, as the controller gets on the edge of my comfortable range, I'm getting really wobbly. I had no chance of hitting Mercy there. Hi, Hammond. Phew, that's a nice shot from the enemy Widow. This almost evens us up. Okay, and there's my lead gone. Not that that's what I'm focusing on. We're struggling to defend the point, and this game might not be much longer. As things get more chaotic, I really have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with this hero. I try to find cover while still being useful, but I'm doing neither effectively. Man, I should have gotten on the point there. I don't know how long I could have lasted, but it would have been better than whatever it was I was doing. That said, I've got to say, I don't feel too bad about losing a game with a character I'm not familiar with half a controller. I still had a great time, did better than I expected I would, and like with Soldier, I reckon there's huge room for me to improve with this if I pursue it further. Now, let's talk about how you can play this the same way I am, while I play a bit more with Soldier 76. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm using a program I wrote called Joyshock Mapper to play the game this way on PC. Joyshock Mapper takes input from your DualShock 4, Switch Pro controller, or Joy-Cons, and converts them to keyboard and mouse input, so that you can play basically any game on PC with actually good gyro controls. It's also, at present, the only way to play with flick stick, which totally changes the way you use the right stick. It complements gyro controls by making up for all its shortcomings with range, and making your controller far more versatile than it was with traditional stick aiming. Joyshock Mapper is open source, and it requires some configuration to work with each game. I've got the configuration I'm using here at a link in the description below. All you have to do is copy it to your computer, change your in-game sends setting to match your game's mouse sensitivity so that it's calibrated correctly, open that configuration in Joyshock Mapper, and you're good to go. Make sure you're using at least Joyshock Mapper version 1.2. I've just updated it so that it works with one Joy-Con like this. Normally we use Joyshock Mapper with a full-size controller, and if you want to play Overwatch like that, I've got a link for that as well. Hopefully I have time to come back to Overwatch with a DualShock 4 and show you how it works with gyro combined with flick stick, but in the meantime you'll get a pretty good idea from watching my other videos. It's exciting to see gyro controls coming to Overwatch officially now that it's coming to Switch, but it didn't need a Switch port to make this happen. PlayStation's DualShock 4 has a perfectly good gyro in it, is my preferred controller for playing games like this, and if used properly, it should be changing the way we play games. Even apart from flick stick, the gyro controls here are better than what you'll encounter in most games. Joyshock Mapper lets you follow the standards set on GyroWiki. GyroWiki is a resource for players and developers to get into really good gyro controls. One of the articles there, which I'll link below, shows other developers how to implement gyro controls that are actually good. It has code samples, visual examples from Overwatch and other games, and should be a starting point for any game's gyro controls. It covers everything from simple quality of life stuff, like using the natural sensitivity scale, the only sensitivity scale that makes sense with gyro aiming in a 3D game, to how to avoid the shortcomings that players often associate with gyro controls, like sloppiness, unresponsiveness, and unpredictability that come from poorly implemented smoothing, weird minimum thresholds, intrusive auto-calibration, and other problems. It's all covered there, and it's really simple to do right once you know how. This is how I play Overwatch on PC, and this is how you should be able to play Overwatch on a PlayStation 4. And hopefully the Switch version of Overwatch rises above what we've come to expect from other games, and maybe even shows us a thing or two by which the recommendations on GyroWiki can be improved. Now, that's probably enough preaching. If you want to see an extended cut of my first 3 games with Overwatch with one Joy-Con, with much less of my talking over it, I'll have a link to that below. More recently, I've tried to have this channel focus on more informative videos, but if extended gameplay videos are something you're interested in as well, or not, I'd love some feedback on that. What other games would you like to see me play with just one Joy-Con? Or with gyro controls or flick stick with a full-size controller? They don't have to be shooters, and even 2D games work great with gyro, because the gyro makes your controller a mouse. So let me know what you'd like to see. And if you reckon someone else can benefit from seeing this or any of my other videos, make sure to point them in my direction. Whether we're cramming complex controls into a tiny Joy-Con just because we can, or exploring better, easier to learn, more competitive, more innovative ways to use a full-size controller, let's change how games are played.
Nice.